Hello, and welcome to the Wade Borth podcast. I'm your host, Wade Borth, and in every episode, my goal is to get you to think differently about how money works and ultimately to empower you to take control of your money and your personal financing system. Hello, and welcome back to the Wade Borth podcast. Today, we're going to talk about, I want to break down this idea of infinite banking, or really any process, but more importantly about infinite banking, because people are like, I hear a lot from agents, from clients, from prospects, from really a lot of different people like, what is this and what do I have to do? And they all want to start with taking a look at the illustration. They want to what does that process look like? And so sometimes I think what we miss is we miss the proper order. And I think there's a great sequence that has to be followed. It doesn't have to be followed, but it makes it so much easier. So today I want to talk about what that process looks like. And we've talked about this a little bit, and we've been if you go out to the website, sagewellstrategy.com, there's some blog posts, and there's maybe another podcast that talks about the strategy. But I want to take it from the light of where I am at today. And so I was actually talking to Tammy Brennan, who is a business coach of mine, and we were having this discussion about how we mature in our ideas and how sometimes we think, well, I've said this before. And she made a great comment. She says, you said it before, but you didn't say it with the lens that you have now. And I'm like, oh, that's good, because my experience, where I'm at in the river is different than where I was at the last time I maybe spoke on this. So if you think you've heard me say this, you're probably right. But bear with me as we go through it with what the lens I have on now, which is the added experience, the added years, the added whatever is happening in my life. And whatever is happening in our business and whatever experience I can bring to you, the listener, it's just so valuable, because this is how we learn, right? It's not just a one-time event, but I wanted to share with you this idea. And I really see it as a four-step process in becoming this idea of becoming your own banker, right? That's the focus of this podcast, is becoming your own banker. But really anything that we do has to go through a process, and it has to go through the right sequence of process. A good friend of mine, and we've had him on the podcast before, Monty Fleck, he always talks about scope and sequence. He's an old educator, and he says, what's your scope and what's your sequence of teaching? And I like that, and I love the takeaway he has with that, because we have the scope today of being around IBC, and what's the sequence of making that happen? And maybe it's a different scope, but it's really got to be the same sequence. And today we're going to talk about this idea of, and we're going to do this probably in a number of different podcasts, so we're going to break this up so it doesn't get too long. You don't have to listen to me talk too long, but this idea of the very first thing we have to do and understand is we have to get a really good grasp of the problem that we're trying to solve for. And it might sound like the simplest thing in the world, but you would be amazed. You would be amazed to hear how many people aren't really sure why we're having this conversation. They hear my podcast, they'll read a book, they'll read IBC or Nelson Nash's book, they'll read something else or listen to somebody else's podcast, and they come to me, and the first thing I'll probably typically ask them is, why are we having this conversation? And a number of them aren't really sure. They just know that they have a problem. So part of what we have to do is help identify the problem. And so that problem being is that typically, especially if we're in the IBC conversation, is that we don't control the banking function in our lives. And when I talk banking, I'm not talking a noun. I'm more talking a verb. And what I mean by that is, if you can just imagine, if I save up $50,000 to buy a used car. So let's talk $50,000. I save up $50,000 to buy a car, and I save that in the bank. So then I take that money out of the bank, I go down to the car dealership, and I plunk down $50,000. They give me the car. What do they do with that money? They run it down to the bank. Then they turn around and they said, I need some inventory. So they borrow money from the bank. And what do they do with that? They go give it to Ford or GM or whoever it might be to buy inventory. What do they do with the money? They take it to the bank. So what I want to get across here is that no matter what the transaction is, if it's a car, and again, a lot of people will look at this, oh, it's a car, it's not part of my business. Okay, same thing. I go buy a piece of real estate. Maybe I save up money. Again, because we talk about there's three different types of people, right? There's the saver, the borrower, and what we call the wealth creator. And the saver and the borrower, let's just describe that. If you save money and you build up that money and you spend it down to go buy something. So you save it before you buy it. Or the majority of the population out here, they'll go out and say, oh, I want X, so I'm going to go to the bank. A car is just a good example because a lot of people have done this. Right? So we need a car, or maybe we need a piece of equipment for our business, or whatever it might be. We go to the bank and we say, hey, can we get $50,000, $100,000 for X for our business, or a car, or whatever it might be? And they go, sure. They collateralize it, they give you the loan, you make payments back. At the end of the day, you still end up at the zero line we talk about. So again, one saves it up and then spends it down. The other one spends it and then pays it back. They end up in the same spot. But what we have to realize, in the real magic here, and I'm going to call it magic, and I heard a guy say this one time, he says, there's no real magic in the world, it's just magicians. And that's so true. The real magic, there's no magic here, but the magician is the bank. They don't care which one you are. Think about that for a second. They do not care if you save your money and then spend it down, or if you buy it and then make payments back to them. We used to believe that there was a difference there. Oh, the banks hate us, gotta pay cash for everything. Nope. They love you just as much as the guy that buys everything on credit, because they need both. They need money to make loans. Now, the Fed makes it real simple because they make, we won't go into the whole fractional reserve banking, but to understand that they love you both, and you make the bank money. Both of you make the bank money, no matter which one you're on. Because again, remember this, if we're buying a car, we're buying a piece of equipment for my business, we're buying real estate, we're buying farmland, machinery to work on the farm, whatever it is, that money always flows back to the bank multiple times. But nobody's ever, well, I shouldn't say nobody. Very few people have stopped to think, why can't I be in that position of the bank? They think they need to have all this capital or all the barriers to entry are there, and they're absolutely right. But on a personal, individual level, why can't we be doing that? So think about this for a second. What if, just imagine, you had the ability to be the place where all that money will eventually come back around too. You save your money up inside your policy, not at the bank, inside a contract between you and a partner called a mutual insurance company. You save your money there versus saving at the bank. And then when you need it, you borrow against it. Again, this is a part of an organization that you own and control because it's part of a mutual insurance company. This is having an understanding of the process. But again, the problem we have is that nobody, I don't say nobody, again, it's probably, I know it's too strong, because there are people out here that are listening to it. People that are probably listening to it are doing this, but I want you to be crystal clear. So when you tell other people why you're working with Wade Borth, what has he done for you? You can say, he's given me some clarity on how the banking function works and how I've taken control of it and how that has given me the certainty and the peace that I'm looking for. That's the real benefit of doing this. And so by understanding the problem, if we understand the problem is that we don't have enough capital typically to make that happen. So our first step is financial awareness. Our second step is the education that needs to go on with it. The third step is I have to make a commitment to have either my existing reserves or cash or money, or I'm going to save money. And I know that hurts some people. They go, oh, I got to save money. I got to restrict my life. Well, no, you don't. You just have to reorder it sometimes to make it happen. But if you want different results, you have to do different things. If you're not willing to do different things, you're going to get the same results. So the whole point is redirecting those dollars and maybe some additional dollars back into a place that gives you liquidity, gives you money, cash. So when you want to purchase a car, buy land, buy a tractor, buy a piece of equipment for your business, buy real estate, whatever it is that you want to do to grow wealth, that's running through your circle, not through Wells Fargo, not through Chase. Because again, the person that's saving money or the person that's borrowing money to make a purchase end up doing it in the same institution. You think you're better, one or the other, you think you're better. Somebody might say, oh, I'm gonna use leverage and credit so I can grow my business, my real estate world. Yeah, sure. Yeah, that seems to work, but the bank loves it and they make more money than you do. What if you could own both sides of that equation? Think about that for a second. Have that imagination running wild. I'm going to go do my real estate. I'm going to do my farming. I'm going to do my business. I'm going to do whatever I'm going to do. That's going to be profitable. The other side of that equation that you're leaving to somebody else to do because you think it's too difficult is the banking function. It's one of the oldest professions in the world. It's not that hard. You just have to understand how money flows. And that's the problem. The problem is the lack of knowledge. The problem is lack of self-discipline. The problem is the lack of a proper time horizon. That's the problem. If you can get over those problems and you can have a capital reserves, then your opportunities are really infinite. Nelson called it the infinite banking concept for that reason alone. If we can solve those problems, again, the problem is that we don't have enough money saved in a proper environment, and we're forced to go use the banks. And again, the bank doesn't care which one you are, if you're the saver or the borrower. They make money both ways. Understand that. They make lots of money both ways. The true wealth creator, because this is the third one I mentioned, the true wealth creator owns both sides of that function. And in the sense, there's probably even a fourth one out there that we don't talk about a lot. And again, you can find this content. There's a lot of content in our podcast and our blogs and some of the material that we have online. If you want to see it, I can also get it to you. So send me a message, wade@sagewealthstrategy.com. I'll send you this. But the true wealth creator actually turns into a legacy maker as well. Because the idea of what does a legacy look like? Legacy is having more money really than you know what to do with and you can spend, and you want to pass that to the next generation. And so what I mean by that is when you start this thing flowing and it starts growing, what's going to happen is that it's going to create enough cash flow that and enough of a pool of money that you're going to start saying, hey, I can't find places to finance it more than myself, so I'm going to go outside. I'm going to go find other people. We start doing hard money lending. We start doing other things that allow us to truly grow wealth. Because somebody else didn't have the money or the discipline or the time frame, the proper time frame, now they're coming to you to borrow money. This is done all the time because they don't understand what the problem is. You've got to control. Now you have an understanding what the problem is, and you've taken control of that problem. And that problem is just a pool of money that you need access to when you want it to be able to make loans. Serves yourself probably first, but after a while, you find other customers, and you're going to start to find a lot of other customers once you've taken control and once you've proven that it works. And you put it on the street that, hey, I got money to lend. We've all heard stories. Hey, I'm doing flips or I'm doing real estate and I got the money guy that's backing me to do this. Well, why don't you become the money guy is the question. Money at work is a whole lot easier on your back than you at work. Think about that for a second. Just imagine you either got your ability to go out and I listened to the Joe Rogan podcast, and he was talking about one summer where he was working, I think it was like the Knights of Columbus, building this ramp for wheelchair access. He says it was a great project, but he says all summer long I worked in this. I hauled concrete bags and lumber, and he says that was hard work. And he says I figured I want my mind and my money to work for me more than I wanted my back to work for me. And that's when you can get money to work. When you get your money to start working for you, that's true power and that's true legacy. I mean, you can teach people to do, that's legacy. Teach your kids to do, that's legacy. Teach everyone around you, that's legacy. So again, when somebody says, hey, Wade, hey, what does Wade Borth do for you? Why are you working with him? What does he do for you? Well, he teaches me these things. He's empowered me. Again, I don't want to be the gatekeeper. I don't want somebody who says, Wade's taking care of my stuff. Nope, I want to empower you to take care of your stuff. But how powerful is that? If you got some in your life right now and you said, man, I wish they were in my camp. I wish they were part of my community. I would love to be able to have a conversation with them. Send me a message. I'd love to be able to talk to those people. Educate them. Help them understand what the problem is. And understanding what the problem is that we just don't have enough money stored up in a place where we can get access to it that continues to work and compound for us the rest of our lives. That's the real benefit. And then whatever we use it for, well, there can be a whole other discussion. And we've had other people on here that do a lot of different things. I don't endorse any of them. I'm not saying they're good or bad. I'm like, this is just to help you grow your mind. Because the mind, once expanded, never goes back to the same place it was. Anyhow, think about this as you go through your day. What is the problem, and am I solving for that problem? And what is the problem in your life, right? So I just threw out some general things out there. But in all reality, that problem is everybody's problem. It's just one iteration of it or another, right? It's just one form of it or another. But it's the same problem. Everybody has the same problem. I don't have a big enough pool of money so I can access it when I want to. And when I do, I'm obligated to Wells Fargo. Well, get out of that cycle. Get obligated to yourself. Get obligated to your family. Think about putting this together for a family banking situation. And that's true legacy when you can grow your family. Bring your family out of that poverty. Poverty of knowledge, right, that the problem causes. Just because somebody has money doesn't mean they're not in poverty. Because they're one generation away, right? We want to bring the whole family out. And that goes through education. And that goes through having an understanding of the process. And then having the discipline to make all that happen. Anyhow, love to hear from you. If you got comments about this, if you want to tell me I'm full of it, love to hear about it. Because I honestly know this is true. I don't believe it. I just know it's true. If people can understand what the problem is, then the rest of what I would consider the 4 steps of IBC, the process, really become irrelevant. Because once you understand and you say, okay, we're going to solve for the problem, then it becomes very clear what you have to do next. If people know what's going on, they're going to know what to do. Step 1, addressing and understanding and addressing the problem, getting real clear on what that is and where you want to go. That's step number 1. Thank you so much for your time. If you're enjoying this podcast or know anyone else that might be interested, please be sure to hit the subscribe button and please leave a review. This will help this podcast reach and help more people by ranking higher in searches and ultimately help more people get out of financial bondage. And don't be afraid to share this podcast with your friends and family, as we can be easily found on Apple Podcasts and Spotify.